We're here with Dan Graziano, ESPN NFL Insider. Lots of interesting games to look forward to this weekend. Starting off tonight, Steelers Bengals. You've got
Hmm.
Aaron Rodgers looking like, if not his best self, good enough to get it done with a good defense behind him. Obviously, the Steelers had Justin Fields. They took a look at Russell Wilson last season. Do you think, given Russ has been benched, Justin's struggling in New York, do you think this is a bit of a masterstroke from the Steelers? You know, they found their guy.
I mean, it's tough to call it a masterstroke since it was kind of their last choice, right? Like they kind of let the offseason go and waited for him. If he had decided to retire, I'm not sure what they do. But it's working fine. And you mentioned if the Steelers can play good defense, which for the first month of the season they really didn't. And they got by with a couple of these games with some, they went to New England and the Patriots turned it over 5 times. And then finally the Steelers were like, okay, we'll take it. So there were a couple games, but the last couple of games, the offense has looked good. They have a young offensive line that is coming together, and Rodgers is doing what they need him to do, which is, take care of the ball, find DK Metcalf, and so they go into the Bengals game tonight. Bengals obviously all kinds of banged up, don't have Joe Burrow, but I think the Steelers have been benefiting from the way the rest of their division has fallen apart, and now their mission is to kind of stay out in front. Don't be the rabbit that they've been in the past, where they go out and set the pace, and then they kind of collapse in the second half, and maybe they get into the playoffs, but they lose in the first round. This is about building on this start for them, making sure that they don't let anybody catch them, and then be the kind of team that they haven't been, which is a team that can make a playoff run. So they got a little ways to go, but you'd rather be them than anyone else in the AFC North right now.
And obviously, with Rodgers, this is a short window. Like, if they're going for the Super
Yes.
Bowl, like, you've got a 40-year-old quarterback. Do you think deadline coming up, do you think perhaps there's a George Pickens shaped hole in this roster, or is there somewhere else you can see them adding, perhaps?
I think they'll look out for a wide receiver. Look, they've spent the last couple of years looking for wide receiver help, and they find it in the offseason in Metcalf. It was a costly trade for them. But then, they move on from Pickens, who they weren't going to extend. And now, yes, you get into the season and have the guys that you thought would step up in place of Pickens done that. They really haven't. Now, what's been the opportunity? This is a scaled down Steelers offense that doesn't take a ton of chances. It loves to throw to the tight ends. It has a lot of tight ends. They catch the ball. The running backs as well. So, how much do you want to spend on a number 2 wide receiver opposite DK Metcalf when that may not be somebody who gets the ball a lot? Now, could it be a specific kind of player that is a speedy field stretcher type that opens things up for the tight ends and the running backs and the guys they want to throw it to in the short range? I think but the Steelers are always judicious in terms of how they use their draft picks. If there's a good fit out there for the offense, then yes, I could see them making a move here in the next couple of weeks. I think they sort of made their big receiver move in the offseason, and now they're in this sort of reset position where, okay, well, here's how it actually does look versus how we planned. So what do we need to do about that?
While we're on the trades, I mean, it looks like receiver, running back, pass rusher, when is it not, is the big one
Right.
on everyone's lips at the minute. Is there any deals you could see happening? Any that, Kamara has been mentioned, or Brees Hall, people like that?
Yeah.
Can you see these getting done?
Yeah, Kamara has sort of made it clear that he doesn't want to leave New Orleans. And, I think it would take a strong offer to get him. And at his age, is someone going to make a strong offer for running back, which is a position that a lot of teams view as sort of, easily replaceable. Now, that said, Brees Hall is a player that has an explosive element to his game, doesn't have a contract beyond this year with the New York Jets. And they have some younger running backs on the roster that they might see as more of a part of their future. So if you go to the Jets with the right kind of offer, Jets are 0-6. More draft picks is a good thing for a team that's going to be, seems like it'll finish near the bottom of the standings. I think that's one to watch. Brees Hall for sure. There are teams out there that I think are interested in adding a running back at the deadline. Houston Texans could use one. The Kansas City Chiefs, so teams like that. Receivers, Jacoby Myers is out in Las Vegas with the Raiders. He wanted a new contract last offseason, didn't get one, requested a trade, didn't get one, so maybe now that happens. So you look for guys like that are kind of sort of toward the end of their contracts and not part of their team's future plans. Pass rushers, Miami has a couple in Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Miami's 1-5. Are they going to start selling off pieces? There are teams that have their eye on those kinds of guys. So yeah, I think it'll be a very active couple of weeks. We've already seen last week. We saw a couple of trades already.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Do you think Trey Hendrickson's another name that might be with the Bengals?
Yeah, I think a lot depends for the Bengals on how the next couple of weeks go. Like if they were to win tonight and beat the Steelers, then and Joe Flacco is playing well, then they can probably convince themselves, hey, we can hang in this thing. They're 2-4. A win tonight would make them 3-4. It would make the Steelers 3-2. So anyway, it would bring the Steelers back closer to everybody else. So with Trey Hendrickson, who only re-upped for this 1 year, is 30 years old, like that's a 2-month rental for some team. So are you the kind of team that wants to trade something for that? What's the price? Would the Bengals really hold your feet to the fire on a trade if we're at deadline day and they're 2-6? So, a team like the New England Patriots, who's off to a great start, already won in Buffalo, has a manageable schedule the rest of the way. That's a team that probably has a lot of cap space, would probably trade something for a 2-month rental if it felt like it might elevate them from cool ascending story to real Super Bowl contender, which a move like that theoretically could. But Hendrickson also hurt now. We don't even know if he's playing in tonight's game, so that always affects this stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. And heading into London, we've probably got, Rams Jaguars is probably the best game in terms of quality for how the teams have been this season. Looking at the Jags, Shad Khan obviously felt they had a contender last season, and it didn't work. He's gone big, GM's gone, head coach has gone. He's got a Sean McVay disciple going up against his mentor. Looking back, they made a very aggressive move in the draft. It was the biggest one. Looking back on that, it's quite early, halfway through the season, but you've got Mason Graham, Judkins, and a first-round pick on one side, and you've got Travis Hunter on the other. Who do you think has come off better from that trade so far?
Yeah, I mean, when you list it out like that, it seems like Cleveland got the better end of the deal, especially 2 first-round picks next year. Now, you look at the team's records, and it doesn't look like that. But Travis Hunter is a young player that the Jaguars traded up to get because they thought he was effectively going to change the math for them and be something like 2 players, or 1 3/4 players. So they feel like they can use him on defense, use him on offense. But a very young player and a very raw player from an NFL standpoint. You see what he can do when he gets the ball in his hands. You see what he can do on the field, the catches he makes, those kinds of things. He needs to develop as a cornerback. He needs to develop as an NFL wide receiver. And the Jaguars know this, and they're finding ways to do that week to week. They've been able to win in the meantime without getting a major impact from the second overall pick in the draft. But, if he continues to ascend, if he continues to learn what they need him to learn, and they are able to use him as that versatile piece. Hey, this week we need more help at cornerback, so we're going to use you more on that side of the ball. Then they have something. I think they knew it was sort of an unprecedented situation, and by virtue of that, some level of risk. But it was one they were willing to take for the talent, and I think it's too early to really pass judgment on that fully.
Sure, and I guess there's no playbook for this, like you mentioned, and
no.
I guess the learning curve is a lot steeper when you're learning not just one position but 2 at the pro level. So you would imagine Hunter might take a little bit more time.
I mean, I asked him. I went down and interviewed him, and I asked, like, "What is your week like? What are your which meetings do you go to?" And so it's all very complicated in terms of how he manages throughout the week and throughout the game. And I think they're all sort of learning and figuring it out together.
Mm-hmm. And, we've touched on the Browns there. They're playing the Dolphins, 2 of the top 5 contenders for the number 1 pick, along with the Ravens, bizarrely. I'm not sure they'll be there end of the season. Jimmy Haslam, his quotes earlier in the season, suggested he wants to take a look at both of his rookies. Do you think that time is coming? Do you think Gabriel might be Stefanski's man and he'll stick with him a bit longer?
I think they're more likely to stick with him a little bit longer, Dylan Gabriel. They like him. And remember, they drafted him 2 rounds earlier than they drafted Shedeur Sanders. So it stands to reason that they would give him the first opportunity and that they would make it a real one. They do have to find out about both of these guys at some point, assuming they're not going to contend. Now, even these teams that are in last place at this point in the season are not all ready to sort of just give up. The Cleveland has an elite level defense and feels like it's been in the games. So I think it's too soon to make decisions based on, hey, we need to look at this guy for next year. So I think they want to give Dylan Gabriel a little bit of a runway here to see what he can do. If he looks completely lost and overwhelmed, then I think that accelerates the timetable of, hey, let's get a look at Shedeur. But if Gabriel looks competent and looks like he's improving and figuring out the things they need him to figure out, then I think he might get a little bit more of a run than people anticipate. I mean, yes, you have 2 first-round picks. You've needed a quarterback for a quarter of a century, and you're going into next year's draft with options. You need to know what you have on your roster. That all makes sense. But in week 7, it's hard to find a coach that can go into his locker room and say, hey, guys, I know this doesn't give us the best chance to win this week, but we really need to see this kid because of next year's draft for a team that half of you might not even be on. So I think it's one where we will see Shedeur Sanders at some point. He's already the number 2. They had him active on game day for the first time. So that means he's a rolled ankle away from going in there. But I don't think the plan right now is to kind of, okay, we've seen Dylan Gabriel for 3 games. Now let's see Shedeur for 3.
We've got Titans going up against their former coach as well this weekend, which, they've obviously started what potentially could be a bit of a domino effect. Do you think, now that Callahan's gone, do you think there's a few other teams thinking about pulling the trigger?
In season, it's sometimes hard to get, like we saw this one coming a little bit. There were murmurs about it. In season changes, not every team's comfortable with. I mean, the one that everybody is watching is Miami. And I keep saying this. I don't have any intel from inside their building to indicate that they're dissatisfied or eager to move on from Mike McDaniel. So you look at it from the outside, this is the kind of situation that where you see the flashing red light, like the coach that kind of had them in the playoffs, and then the program starts to slip a little bit, and now they're off to a lousy start. They are playing hard for him. They are in their games late. So I think he has a little bit. I think he has a little bit of a chance to stick for at least a little while. Get to the end of the season. If it's not good enough, who knows? Maybe they make changes. But a lot of these teams ask themselves, like, if we make the change now in season, like, what's the point? Is it going to help save our season? Do we just not like this person? I don't think those things apply in Miami. So maybe I'll look like an idiot next week, but I don't think he's sort of like coaching for his job there in Miami. But, you look ahead to the end of the season, there are teams that, like Miami, that if they don't do something this year, I think it's probably fair to assume the organization reevaluates. Is it time in Arizona's program to show more than they've shown so far, that kind of thing. So we've talked a lot about Brian Daboll in New York. Now, if Jackson Dart continues to show the promise he's shown, maybe that helps protect Daboll. But if not, then, and they go whatever, 5-12, then maybe they reassess. So, again, a little too early for some of this, even though, yes, one has already been fired.
Sure. And on the more positive side of that, we've mentioned the Jets and Dolphins. They're probably sick of seeing the Patriots, and then all of a sudden the Bills come over. I mean, the Jets haven't won a division since 2002. Do you think now with Vrabel, with Drake May, Stephon Diggs has probably got a couple of years left, are the Patriots back? Could they, go on another run of winning, I don't know how many divisions?
Well, we'll find that out. Like the Buffalo's dominated the division now. They've won it 5 years in a row because, they have the dominant quarterback and their coaching situation's been so stable and so good. But if you are in that division, you're looking at the Patriots like, well, Drake May looks farther along than I think we might have expected him to be at this point. Maybe even more than the Patriots expected him to be at this point, which is cool. They're able to they're leaning on him. They still don't have a great group around him. The running back room is sorting itself out. You mentioned Stephon Diggs, but there's not a ton at wide receiver. So this is a quarterback in Drake May that's sort of helping carry this team to this hot start. So that is concerning if you're in the division. Like, oh, have they found their guy? Have they done it again? And we know Mike Vrabel can coach teams into the playoffs. We've seen it. So, yes, I think it'll be interesting to see what they do here, as I mentioned, at the deadline. But you think about the Patriots, not even long-term, 2025, they're 4-2. They've already won in Buffalo. again, the schedule looks very, very manageable for them the rest of the way. And they have a coach that knows how to do it and a quarterback they believe in, an offensive coordinator who's got all kinds of experience, right? This is not a learning on the job offensive coordinator like a lot of these young quarterbacks get sometimes. So, yeah, I think the Patriots are in a position where they're sitting back going, okay, like maybe we might want to hit the accelerator here a little bit earlier than we might have thought. And that's a fun place to be.
Sure, and not quite as fun place to be. It feels like a bit of deja vu to last season, but last season, the Eagles were in crisis coming into their bye
Mm.
week. Like Sirianni was in the hot seat, people were claiming, and then all of a sudden, they won the Super Bowl, so we know how that ended. Kind of there again. Eagles have got what you call a mini
Yeah.
bye. Do you think there could be some meetings? I know AJ Brown
Oh,
denied that it happened. Is that coming?
yeah, I think they're happening as we speak, and I think the Eagles know that there needs to be some sort of reset on the offensive side of the ball. They're just not operating the way they were last year. This time last year, they had an early bye. They had a week 5 bye, and then they kind of went into the offensive coordinator's office. It was Kellen Moore, who's now coaching the Saints, which is part of the problem. And they said, all right, look, we've got this. We're playing so well as an offensive line. Every time we open a hole for Saquon Barkley, he runs into next week. So let's just do that. Let's make that the foundation of our offense. And it worked, carried them to the Super Bowl. It's not working. Now, why isn't it working? The offensive line is not playing as well as it was last year. There's a little bit of a personnel difference. Mekhi Becton, who was this massive guard that they had signed in free agency, he left. He's in LA with the Chargers. One of the offensive linemen I work with, former player that I work with, was explaining to me, like, it's kind of basic. Like, there are gaps in between the center and the guard that weren't there last year for the defense to get through because the guard isn't as big. So like, that makes some sense. So anyway, and they're banged up. Landon Dickerson's been banged up, a lot of the offensive line. So what do? Can you lean on Jalen Hurts in the passing game more? Yes, you have star receivers, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, the tight end. But in the past, when you have leaned on Jalen Hurts in the passing game, you've seen inconsistencies. You've seen turnovers. And that's one of the reasons that they pulled back and reverted to the run game last year, in addition to the fact that they were getting explosive plays in the run game, which they're not anymore. So they have to come up with something. Because you mentioned last year where it looked like trouble early on and they recovered and won the Super Bowl. There's also to consider the year before when they started 10-1 and it all looked very shaky and eventually it did fall apart and they lose in the first round of the playoffs. So is this a 2023 repeat or a 2024 repeat in Philadelphia?
Sure. And if we sort of finish off on the Chiefs, going up against Max Crosby, divisional rivalry, he loves the challenge of going after Mahomes. I think that's why he wakes up in the morning for these kind of games. Is this the week where you want question marks over your offensive line? Is there anything on Josh Simmons and that situation?
Josh Simmons' situation is mysterious. We were told that he was out in California on Sunday for a family situation that was some level of emergency, but he's still not back. And we don't exactly know why. And the Chiefs are being tight-lipped about it. And they're not just saying, oh, it's personal, we want to respect that. They're saying things like, we're praying for him. So first and foremost, hopefully it's nothing serious, life-threatening, et cetera. But just because we're talking football, we bring it to the football. So that would be an absence, I think, that would cost the Chiefs long term. They're able to plug in Jalen Moore, who they signed in the offseason as kind of hopefully a swing tackle if they were to draft their franchise left tackle, which they did. And he played well on Sunday. But I don't think they want to go the rest of the season with him at left tackle. So they would love to get Josh Simmons back as soon as possible. The fact that he wasn't there at practice on Wednesday is concerning in terms of his availability for this week. And the Chiefs are better in some spots on the offensive line they were last year. Kingsley Suamataia, who they tried at left tackle last year, he's playing well with the left guard. So they are in a little bit better position to weather it than they might have been last year when they had to move Joe Thuney, the guard, out to left tackle, and you saw what happened in the Super Bowl. So they're getting Rasheed Rice back this week from his 6-game suspension that he served to start the year. The offense very excited about that. He is their best receiver. And the offense had already been starting to play better these last couple of weeks. But yes, I think you're absolutely right, Jamie. Watching that left tackle spot will be key here going forward for the Chiefs if Josh Simmons is suddenly a question mark.
Mm-hmm. And you've mentioned Rasheed Rice there. I know that I saw some stats, a lot of fantasy managers who've sort of drafted him and thought, oh, well, my team will get a lot better when he gets back. A lot of those teams are now 1-5. Now, obviously, the Chiefs haven't won as many games as they did at this point last season, but they've had a tough schedule. You know, the Eagles, the Chargers, the Jags are a
Hmm.
good team. So, do you think they'll look at it and go, okay, 3-3, our best receiver, probably best pass catcher now that Kelsey's getting a bit older, is out? Do you think they'll actually be quite happy and the sort of the three losses almost keeps you sharp?
I think they are quite happy. They have been talking. I've talked to people in that building for the last few weeks, and how's the offense coming together? Where are you seeing improvement? And every conversation ends with someone saying, "And we get number 4 back in week 7." So like they have been anticipating this. They're like one of those fantasy teams, right? It's been waiting for 6 weeks to have him. So they're very excited about it. I think they feel like it'll change a lot for their offense. And again, the offense already playing well. Mahomes playing at a high level. Maybe Rasheed Rice being out there opens things up for a running game that has struggled. So yes, I think that's actually a good comparison. The fantasy manager who's been carrying Rasheed Rice on his team all year and unable to stash him in an IR spot because he hasn't been hurt, he's suspended. The Chiefs are very much like that fantasy manager in real life.
And finally, just on that, obviously Rice out week 4 last season, then the suspension. So, you know, he's missed a good chunk of time, well over a calendar year. Do you think there might be a ramp up, or is he experienced enough that maybe he can just slot in and play?
I don't think there's going to be it has to be a full ramp up as if he's been off a year. Because you remember, he was practicing with them in the off season and in training camp. So he's been away for 6 weeks, but he hasn't been away from football activity for, a year. So I think they'll watch it and make sure. But everything I've been told is he showed up in great shape. They feel like they can give him his regular workload. If they, how these days they have the tracking devices and everything that can tell when a guy's going slower than he should be, or maybe he's hurt. So there'll be some of that, but I think they plan to use him and use him like they would normally have used him, pre-injury.
Sure. Really appreciate all that, Dan. Very insightful stuff, and hopefully another good week of NFL action.
Thanks, Jamie.